So the past 12 hours of the NFL, the 49ers, the Jags, the Bucks, the Raiders, they've gotten even crazier this morning. Robert Saleh still in line to become the 49ers defensive coordinator, maybe thanks to the fact that Liam Coen ghosted Tampa Bay and is going to become Jacksonville's head coach. And to add some seasoning onto our crazy roller coaster ride, Pete Carroll is headed to the Raiders to be the coach. So Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh are back in the same division, not the NFC West. That's so 10 years ago, maybe even more than 10 years ago when both of those guys overlapped. Yeah, it's been over a decade since Harbaugh mutually parted from the 49ers. This is so 15 years ago. Both in the AFC West. Jim Harbaugh, Pete Carroll, what's your deal? Oh, and the other two coaches there are Andy Reid and Sean Payton. But we can go over everything. This is the wild NFL 49ers confluence from the unprecedented Liam Coen drama that led to Trent Baalke's ouster. Baalke was obviously part of that mutual parting of ways when Jim Harbaugh left the 49ers following the 2014 season. We can talk about Robert Saleh being in line to return to the 49ers. Not official yet, but maybe it becomes official today. We can talk about Pete Carroll to the Raiders, the history of Harbaugh and Pete Carroll. I mean, absolutely everything, starting with what set up Robert Saleh to the 49ers. I mean, it was a windy road. The 49ers interviewed Saleh on January 9th, but they had to wait through all these twists and turns because Saleh was, and still technically is, on the head coaching interview circuit, but the main obstacle to San Francisco landing the big fish for their defensive coordinator spot was Jacksonville, because Saleh had a history in Jacksonville. And for a while, up until yesterday afternoon, it looked like Saleh was the favorite for Jacksonville's job. There was a period of time from Wednesday to Thursday where Liam Coen had publicly backed out of the Jacksonville running, where Saleh was considered the favorite. And then that changed really, really quickly. The unprecedented Liam Coen drama. So if we want to go through a timeline, first, Jacksonville, this goes all the way back to early January after the season was over. Jacksonville fired Doug Peterson, but kept Trent Baalke as general manager. So Baalke, at least at the time, survived yet another coaching dismissal. Remember, he had survived the dismissal of Jim Harbaugh in 2014 from the 49ers, the dismissal of Jim Tomsula after the 2015 season from the 49ers. Finally, Baalke was fired alongside Chip Kelly, and then he went to Jacksonville. But he survived the firing of Doug Peterson in Jacksonville, left a lot of people scratching their heads, including potential head coaching candidates for the Jaguars. Ben Johnson didn't like the setup in Jacksonville. So Ben Johnson said thanks, but no thanks. He ended up going to the Chicago Bears. Aaron Glenn, another former Lions defensive coordinator, said thanks, but no thanks. Didn't even interview with Jacksonville because Trent Baalke was there. He ended up going to the New York Jets. And then Liam Coen, well, I think that at least for a while he said thanks, but no thanks. But as soon as he left Jacksonville and said, I'm going to take the Tampa Bay offensive coordinator job, Jacksonville reversed course. Shad Khan came to his senses. The owner of the Jaguars decided to finally fire Trent Baalke. And that's when we saw the crazy 180. That's when we saw Liam Coen say, well, I've already agreed, but not in writing. He didn't sign the contract. I've agreed to become one of the highest paid coordinators in football with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he saw a whole lot of success last year. Baker Mayfield threw 41 touchdown passes. The Bucs averaged over 29 points per game. It turns out that Liam Coen, according to a lot of reporting, most of it from Rick Stroud, who does a great job covering Tampa Bay, Coen ghosted the Bucs with his contract waiting to be signed. They thought it was just a formality at that point. Ghosted the Bucs for 26 hours, flew secretly back to Jacksonville, and hid under the guise of his kid being sick. Said that he had to take his kid to the doctor's office. That's what he finally told Todd Bowles, the head coach of the Bucs, after the 26-hour ghosting. But he had, in actuality, been in Jacksonville the whole time, meeting secretly with the owner, Shad Khan, and hammering out details of a new contract, which, according to Diana Rossini, is going to pay him, quote unquote, Ben Johnson money, which is about $13 million per year. That is number 7 of all head coaches. So in an absolutely wild turn of events, Liam Coen somehow, some way, finds his way into top dollar for a head coach instead of top dollar for an offensive coordinator. And I think the somehow, some way was Trent Baalke was forced out in Jacksonville. I think that's what all these candidates wanted. Because of that, Robert Saleh didn't even make the trip from New Jersey down to Jacksonville for his second interview. And because of that, Robert Saleh is in line to be the 49ers' next defensive coordinator, although I do have to emphasize that this is not official yet. We expect more developments today. Yesterday, we got a lot of the news regarding the 49ers that surrounded this. Nick Sorensen, the former defensive coordinator, is not expected to return. Brant Boyer, who was Saleh's special teams coordinator in New York, has interviewed for the special teams coordinator position that is open in San Francisco. Boyer might even be the favorite for that job. Matt Barrows tweeted that yesterday. That still remains unclear, and the timeline on that might be next week when they fill that special teams coordinator role. But that DC role, that may come much more quickly because finally the 49ers are on the straightaway where they can go all gas, no brakes. That was Robert Saleh's rallying cry back with the 49ers when he was their defensive coordinator from 2017 to 2020. Maybe that's going to be their rallying cry again with Robert Saleh likely on his way back, trying to bring back the good times defensively. This show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/gameon today. That is rocketmoney.com/gameon. rocketmoney.com/gameon. The 49ers probably didn't save all too much money with this Robert Saleh hiring. Reportedly, they had offered him top-level defensive coordinator money, and that's okay with them. They're not sparing any expenses trying to get the defense back to the glory days. Saleh shepherded it into its best years. He was the coordinator from 2017 to 2020. I put this graph up yesterday, but I accidentally put number 14 in 2022 under total rank. You could see that I fixed that today. That 2022 defense, that wasn't Saleh's defense. That was DeMeco Ryans' defense. They finished number 1 in football. But the 2019 unit, that was number 2. That was Saleh's defense. I think his best work might have come in 2020 when the 49ers were injured as hell and they still finished number 8. Then they fell off in 2021, mainly because the pass defense fell off to number 23. But signing Charvarius Ward, getting that top corner in 2022, seeing the development of Deommodore Lenoir in 2022 allowed the 49ers to turn things around before the slide of the past 2 seasons. First from 1 to 10, then from 10 to 26. Sorensen pushed out. Saleh now on his line, in line to come back in, and San Francisco hoping to bring back the glory days when there was more blue on this chart. This past season, there wasn't a whole lot of blue on the chart. It was number 26 in the National Football League. So that's what the 49ers want to do. They want to make sure that this defense can rediscover its roots, but remain adaptable enough to combat opposing offenses. It's a constant chess match between defenses and these offensive coordinators in the NFL, and you could see it's becoming an increasingly offensive-oriented league. Somebody like Liam Coen, I mean, this ties into that theory. Somebody like Liam Coen has called plays, 1 year in the National Football League. I mean, he had been with the Rams as Sean McVay's offensive coordinator, but obviously wasn't calling the plays. McVay was calling the plays there. Then to Kentucky, back to the Rams. Or was it the other way around? Was it Rams, Kentucky, Rams? Yeah, I think it was Rams, Kentucky, Rams. Then to Tampa Bay, and he called plays there, and he did a really good job. But it didn't take all too large of a play calling sample for Liam Coen to become so coveted, at least by one team, at least by Jacksonville, that they were willing to make him one of the highest paid coaches in football, and they're willing to completely shake up their front office. They're finally willing to see the light with Trent Baalke. They got Baalke out of there to pave the way for Liam Coen to come in and be their head coach. Now, the one really interesting twist here, and this one relates to the 49ers, is that the interim GM of Jacksonville is now Ethan Waugh. Ethan Waugh had been with the 49ers in their scouting department for nearly 2 decades. Actually, initially, I think, hired by Trent Baalke, but he had bridged the gap between the Baalke era scouting department and the John Lynch era scouting department. So that meant that Ethan Waugh also overlapped with Robert Saleh in San Francisco. Anyway, he took over as interim GM, and he might have held a hand or had a hand in the reapproachment, we'll call it, the reapproachment of Liam Coen, the re-engagement of Liam Coen. He might have had a hand in saying, hey, come back, start negotiating with us. And in that way, the former 49er, Ethan Waugh, might have opened the door for San Francisco to be able to bring Robert Saleh in. So just a crazy, crazy turn of events. This is drawing a lot of national news, not the Saleh part. That is the 49ers portion of this entire saga. Obviously, that's the offshoot that benefits the 49ers. But the entire Liam Coen situation seems unprecedented. The fact that he had the deal agreed to but not signed in Tampa Bay, the fact that he secretly flew back down to Jacksonville, ghosted the team. They didn't hear from him for 26 hours. I mean, Rick Stroud's reporting on this is just fascinating. Just go check out his Twitter. All of that happening has drawn the expected national attention, and then the 49ers are the beneficiaries in this wild NFL confluence. Meanwhile, Pete Carroll, who we talked about a couple days ago as a potential 49ers backup plan in case this Saleh reunion did not work out, Pete Carroll is now signed on, or is expected to sign on, as the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. This is Pete Carroll in his mid-70s, College of Marin alum. He was classmates there and at Redwood High School in Larkspur with Robin Williams, the same age. Carroll, the defensive coordinator of the 49ers in 95 and 96, and also really the forefather of this current 49ers scheme with Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh in 2013 worked under Pete Carroll. That was the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks defense. They had Richard Sherman on that team. 49ers fans would like to wipe that part of the Richard Sherman experience out of their memories, right? But Saleh brought the Pete Carroll Seattle-style cover 3 to San Francisco in 2017. And then Pete Carroll had been floated as an option for the 49ers in case Saleh didn't work out, because, again, he was the forefather himself of the scheme. Now Pete Carroll is going to the AFC West, where we've got an absolutely insane coaching lineup. Saleh, sorry, the confluence is finding its way into my brain here. Like it's also interconnected. Saleh is not part of the AFC West. It's Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh as part of the AFC West. And then, those guys, Andy Reid and Sean Payton, they're not afterthoughts. Those are big-time coaches. So Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, and now Pete Carroll in the same division. It's going to be awesome. I mean, for me, this goes all the way back to covering Stanford. I was the student radio broadcaster. The first road game that I ever covered was in 2007. It was at the Coliseum in LA, with same location as when Robert Saleh became a national star, right? That was in 2019. Robert Saleh at the Coliseum. The Rams still played there. Remember the 4th down stop in week 6 when the 49ers beat the defending NFC champion Rams and Robert Saleh was going crazy on the sideline, and then he went crazy after Jimmy Ward made a couple other plays later in that game, and the 49ers announced themselves to the rest of the league. They were 6-0, and Saleh was there flexing on the sideline. That same energy is what the 49ers want back now. Anyway, that happened at the Coliseum. Historic place, hosted a pair of Olympic Games. Probably going to host some stuff at the Olympics coming up in 2028 when they return to LA. But you could rewind all the way back to 2007. Stanford was a 41-point underdog against USC, and that was Stanford coached by Jim Harbaugh, USC coached by Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh were talking some smack back and forth before that game. Everybody thought Harbaugh was out of his mind because his team wasn't very good. They were 41-point underdogs. But he said that we bow to no man, we bow to no program here at Stanford University. He said that before playing Pete Carroll. His quarterback had a seizure eating sushi the week of the game. So the 49ers, so Stanford had to start a sophomore quarterback who had never played before. USC would go on to win the Rose Bowl that year, yet somehow, some way, featuring Richard Sherman as wide receiver, making a huge catch on 4th and 20, Stanford went in and beat USC 24-23. And then Jim Harbaugh beat Pete Carroll again 2 years later, went for 2, trying to beat him by 30 plus, wanted to score 50, and he did against USC in that game. And Pete Carroll said, "Hey, what's your deal?" And Jim Harbaugh said, "I don't know. What's your deal?" It was the most awkward handshake ever. That led into the 49ers-Seahawks rivalry. Obviously, Carroll got the best of that in the 2013 season that we talked about with Richard Sherman tipping the pass that was intercepted by Malcolm Smith. But both Sherman and Smith would end up joining the 49ers later because Shanahan and Lynch were trying to build a Seattle-style defense in 2017 and 2018, and that's why they brought Robert Saleh over. I mean, the whole history is absolutely crazy. And now it takes another twist with Pete Carroll going to the Raiders and rejoining Jim Harbaugh in that division. Oh, I just can't get over the last 12 hours or so, maybe the last 15 hours at this point. It's a wild NFL 49ers at Confluence with Liam Coen heading to Jacksonville, Robert Saleh still in line to return to the 49ers, and Harbaugh and Pete Carroll back to the NFC West. I'm going to open this up for some questions. I had a 49ers Pete Carroll Q&A tag ready to go the other day. I think I'm going to change that. By the way, you should sign up for a membership to the San Francisco Standard. I'm going to put up an article up on the screen in a second, but I'm going to put 49ers NFL Q&A for now. I mean, Pete Carroll's part of this right now. He's part of the news cycle. But drop your questions in, and let me get this article ready for everybody to see. All right. This is up on the Standard. I'm going to send this over to Mike so we can have this up on the screen and people can go check it out. Mike, there you go. There's the link. And there it is. Now, this is all barring unforeseen events. I have the qualifier right here. Barring unforeseen events, Robert Saleh is expected to return as the 49ers defensive coordinator. He was the big fish of the team's search to replace the ousted Nick Sorensen, who isn't expected to remain on staff. Saleh first presided over a remarkable 49ers defensive turnaround from 2017 to 2020, and following 3+ seasons as the head coach of the New York Jets, is now back for a second run with the team, barring unforeseen events. Anyway, the article is linked in the description of the YouTube, so go ahead and check that out. I included a lot of data of what the 49ers might be looking for, and I also talked about potential downstream effects of this. What coaches might Robert Saleh bring if he does indeed officially signed with the 49ers, what players he might bring. I mean, Javon Kinlaw, Solomon Thomas, DJ Reed, all those guys are going to see their contracts expire with the Jets after March, whenever the new league year starts in March. So in less than 2 months from now. So populate the Q&A with your questions. And we'll go from there. '49ers NFL Q&A. There is Robert Saleh. That's Saleh with the Jets in week 1 of this past 2024 season. Showed up, the 49ers beat the Jets, and Saleh was fired by week 5. But even with the Jets, he had a good defense. And that's something that we talked about in the piece here. I mean, I have the 49ers EPA through the years. You see the blue. That's good. Blue is good. Red is bad. Under Saleh and DeMeco Ryans, life was good for San Francisco. It started worsening, especially in run defense under Steve Wilkes, and then obviously cratered under Nick Sorensen. So here is the performance of Robert Saleh's defenses over the years. You could see that the only truly bad year in run defense, and this includes his time with the Jets, was his first year with the Jets, 2021. But I think that made Saleh's tenure with the Jets, defensively at least, all the more impressive. They were the worst defense in football his first year there because they inherited a bare cupboard. They had to rebuild that thing. 2022 and 2023, I mean, these were progressively better defenses, and they were number 6 in 2024 before he got fired, and then they fell off a cliff. So that's probably even more of a reason to believe that Robert Saleh was shepherding a very good defense in New York, a similar type of buildup as he executed in San Francisco from 2017 to 2020. That's all in the piece, so go ahead and check it out. It is up on The Athletic, up on the San Francisco Standard. 49ers, they're big fish in Robert Saleh. Barring unforeseen events, that's the direction that things are going to head for the 49ers. This is a good question. Will Brandon Staley stay as cornerbacks coach? I actually believe he's a good coach. I mean, I think all the evidence suggests that Brandon Staley is a good assistant coach in the NFL. Maybe even a good coordinator. I mean, in 2020, the Rams finished as the number 1 defense. That was his one lone year as coordinator. What Staley did with San Francisco was work with the defensive backs primarily this past year, and they had a good year. Deommodore Lenoir called him a genius. Deommodore Lenoir had a great year for San Francisco. So I'm really curious if this does become official, how Saleh is going to build his staff with the 49ers. Because he's got a couple guys, Tony Oden, who's the DB coach, was the DB coach of the Jets, and Aaron Whitecotton, who was the defensive line coach of the Jets. He's got a couple guys with old 49ers ties who followed him from the 49ers to New York. Then there's Joe Woods, who's a free agent. He was the defensive coordinator of the Saints. Prior to that, the DC of the Browns. But in 2019, Joe Woods was the very good DB coach of the 49ers. And they ran a ton of disguised coverages, quarters, cover 3. That really helped evolve San Francisco's defense. If Woods is available, if he doesn't take a DC job, is he going to be on board with San Francisco? Or is Dennis Allen, we still don't know where Dennis Allen is officially going to end up. He was Joe Woods' old boss in New Orleans. Is he going to bring Joe Woods with him to work under him if Joe Woods can't get a defensive coordinator spot? So all of this remains up in the air, and an entire subset of questions rests with the 49ers' existing defensive staff. So that's Chris Kasarik, who has worked under Robert Saleh before, and that includes Brandon Staley, who hasn't worked under Robert Saleh, but was brought in for some scheme diversification in 2024 as the assistant head coach. Would Brandon Staley stick around? That's a great question. And I think that he did a really good job with the defensive backs this last year. He was a good defensive coordinator for the Rams. I did a whole video on it yesterday. That was back in 2020. And in the years leading up to that, he was an outside linebackers, kind of an edge rusher coach for Vic Fangio, a former 49ers defensive coordinator under Jim Harbaugh. I mean, the more we talk about this, the more we realize that football is a small world. Matt Mayoko said this morning on the future of Brandon Staley, I'm hearing that he probably will not be back. So that's the only kind of, it's not very firm. It's a probably, but that's the only word that we have in that regard. So to answer the question here, the one indication we have, he probably will not be back, although that is not certain. And all of this is worth considering because we have to figure out where the 49ers are going to go with their existing staff, where Saleh is going to go with his former staff in New York, how he's going to meld the past, the present, and the future together if this all does indeed become official. Yep. I don't think that Saleh took the trip to Jacksonville. According to most reports yesterday, he didn't take off from New Jersey. I think that Patrick Graham took the trip to Jacksonville. But obviously with Liam Coen hammering out the deal with the Jaguars yesterday, that whole process was disrupted. It was just a mess yesterday. I think that the flight, though, for Robert Saleh was canceled before he took off, according to what I've seen. Somebody asking if Eric Armstead is going to be back as the run stopper in 2025. We do know that Robert Saleh really liked Armstead. But hey, the most important thing that the 49ers can do is hit it out of the park with another draft class. 2024, big-time success for San Francisco drafting. Can they do the same in 2025? I think that is a big key for the 49ers because you can't, I mean, you could talk about some of these veterans coming back. Maybe, somebody like Solomon Thomas, I don't think that would be a crazy re-sign for the 49ers because this is not a player that's going to cost several $1 million. This is not somebody you're looking at to be a star, but your run defense has absolutely plummeted. And part of the reason is that you're having trouble setting edges. Here's the graphic looking at the 49ers run defense over the years. Somebody like Solomon Thomas has been a trusted agent of Robert Saleh with both the 49ers and the Jets. And it's somebody you can bring in on a one-year deal. Could be a good rotational defensive end for the 49ers that does the small stuff right. He's not going to be flashy, not going to bring a whole lot of sacks, but the first thing you need to do is repair the run defense. In that case, yes, you might see an old friend return to the 49ers. But still, even if you do make a signing like Solomon Thomas, the 49ers absolutely must continue swinging and hitting in the NFL draft to keep this sustainable. I write about the finances all the time. We had the big salary cap piece up on the San Francisco Standard earlier this week. By the way, here's the piece. The 49ers likely land their big fish in Robert Saleh. Here are the wild twists that made it possible. Well, the piece that we wrote earlier this week emphasized the importance of the draft class. And the 49ers have 10 picks coming up in this 2025 draft. Those 10 picks will cumulatively cost $13.4 million on the 2025 salary cap. Only $13.4 million across 10 players. To give you an example of how affordable that is, Chase Young left to the New Orleans Saints and signed for $13 million all by himself in the 2024 season. So it's either somebody like Chase Young for $13 million or 10 other players that you draft for a total of $13.4 million. That's how the draft is the lifeblood of any organization, especially an organization that is going to make Brock Purdy likely the highest paid quarterback in football this offseason. So the 49ers can afford all these star players, but they absolutely must be efficient financially at the margins. And when we talk about Robert Saleh coming in and retaking over the reins of this defense, we can talk and wax nostalgically about the past and all these players the 49ers used to have. By the way, the only two players currently on the roster right now defensively for the 49ers that were on the roster when Saleh was last defensive coordinator are Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. But we could talk about reestablishing the past, and some of these players will be available. Some of them might join the 49ers, but still, the vast majority of the defense from 2025 moving forward is going to be comprised of fresh blood. You've got to hit on that draft. That's just the way that things are financially set up for the 49ers. You've got to find that efficiency. You've got to find those 10 players for $13.4 million instead of that one player for $13 million. That's how you build any good, sustainable team. Dan asking about the special teams coach. What are my thoughts on that? Well, they interviewed Brant Boyer, who was Robert Saleh's special teams coach with the Jets. He might be the favorite. Chris Banjo, who they also interviewed, he actually might go to replace Boyer with the Jets. So we're in a holding pattern for that now. I would think that next week is when that will be finalized. Maybe Saleh is going to be finalized today. That would be cool. That means that we would be able to deliver another update on that today, get that completely out of the way. But I'm assuming Saleh has to fly to the Bay Area and sign a contract to make that official. By the way, the Pete Carroll situation is related to this technically because Saleh told the 49ers that if he's a defensive coordinator this year, it will be for San Francisco. That was according to Matt Mayoko. And that means that you just go process of elimination. He's interviewed for 3 head coaching jobs. The Raiders are one of them. Jacksonville was another one, and Dallas was another one. So Dallas and Jacksonville, Las Vegas and Jacksonville both off the table, right? Since Las Vegas hired Pete Carroll, Jacksonville's hiring Liam Coen. That means that Dallas is the only remaining technical possibility on the head coaching circuit, unless somebody else randomly interviews Robert Saleh. But I don't know if he's going to slow play the signing just to keep the door open. That would be a Liam Coen-like reversal. That was unprecedented. Maybe Saleh can make it more precedented, but it's just crazy. Anyway, the whole New York shuffle. Chris Banjo might be the special teams coordinator there. I know the question was about the special teams coordinator, and that would mean that he likely wouldn't be the special teams coordinator for the 49ers. And Brant Boyer might be somebody that San Francisco is favored to land in that position. And Boyer's coordinated some really good special teams units with the Jets. Number 5 as recently as last season in DVOA. He had a number 2 special teams unit in 2021. But I've long maintained that special teams is going to be about attitude, more about attitude for the 49ers than the actual name at coordinator. It's got to start from the top down with Kyle Shanahan. They have to care about special teams, and not just on a roster building level, on an in-game level. Run a fake punt at least once a season. Add some creativity into kick return or a punt return at least once a season. There has to be something that shows that philosophically the 49ers not only want to avoid losses with special teams, but also want to seize wins with special teams, regardless of how good their offense or defense is. Why not make a 3-unit juggernaut? Why did the special teams always have to bring up the rear, especially if you have a good roster? I think it's that mentality that allowed New England to be a good special teams unit for essentially all 20 years that Bill Belichick was the coach there. He was obsessed with special teams. He didn't just say, oh, don't screw it up. He told special teams, I care about the very minute details of long snapping, and I want those to translate into victories. And the 49ers learned the really, really hard way this past year, where they gave up 65 expected points. Like they were negative 65 expected points on special teams. It was literally the difference between them being a negative point differential and a positive point differential football team. So San Francisco is in a position now where I think they have to take this seriously. And we'll see if that overarching tune towards special teams does change for the 49ers. The windy road that brought us here. That was a text title I had in there last night. It has been a windy road indeed. Boy, has this been crazy. All right, I'm ready for more questions about the windy road that did bring us here. What about signing Drew Dahlman? Well, we can't talk about that officially. I mean, we could talk about it, but we can't see if it's actually going to happen until March because everybody's still under contract with their previous teams. Free agency isn't coming for another month and a half or so. But I like the idea. I think that a veteran center upgrade for the 49ers could be the key to take the next step on the offensive side of the football. I will probably try to keep this to a defensive discussion today since we're talking about the likely landing of Robert Saleh and the wild twists that made it possible. Max asks, did the 49ers get Saleh? No, not officially. The 49ers likely land their big fish in Robert Saleh. Here are the wild twists that made it possible. It's still in likely territory. You can't pretend that it's over until it's over, especially after you saw what happened to Liam Coen in Tampa Bay before going to Jacksonville. But we can do some of the math. We can say that it's very likely, and we can wait for official word, but I can't tell you exactly when that official word is coming. And then Gabriel asks, any New York Jets players Saleh may want to bring over to the 49ers? Everybody's talking about Hassan Reddick. They do need another edge rusher. And then the former 49ers are obvious candidates, Solomon Thomas, Javon Kinlaw, DJ Reed. DJ Reed is the one that stands out to me. Diamara Lenore yesterday tweeted a bunch of fire emojis, apparently very excited about this potential addition of Robert Saleh. And I always thought of Diamara Lenore as DJ Reed version 2.0. I mean, he was a 5th-round draft pick in 2021. DJ was a 5th-round pick in 2018. DJ Reed was initially envisioned to be the 49ers inside-out cornerback, could play outside, could play in the slot. And then they lost him. Then they lost him in a really tough way. They waived him with an injury designation, and they didn't think anybody would poach him. But we can go back to Pete Carroll now. Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks poached him in 2020, and he became a star for the Seahawks. And then he signed with the Jets and continued starring with the Jets. And then because of that, he reunited with Robert Saleh. So his contract expires after this season. 49ers need more cornerbacks. They only have 2 legitimate corners on their roster for 2025, Renardo Green and Demo Lenore. So maybe they can bring in Demo Lenore version 1.0, DJ Reed, back into the fold. I think we're just logically connecting a lot of the dots at this place. Speaking of DJs, is DJ Jones available? He should be. He should be entering free agency. It's the last year of DJ Jones' contract. So I think that the popular tune this offseason, assuming this Saleh deal does get done, is that there are going to be a lot of talk about which former players might the 49ers bring back. And I wouldn't be shocked if they did bring back 1 or 2 of those former players. But I will continue to emphasize that the draft must be and will be the lifeblood of the 49ers efforts if they are to surge back into true defensive effectiveness. And by true defensive effectiveness, I mean this. I mean going back to the metrics of this San Francisco team over the course of the past few years and looking pre-2023. I mean, Saleh was succeeded by D'Amico Ryans, and D'Amico might have even been able to elevate the 49ers defense a little bit after Saleh did such a good job building it up. But the progress that they made from 2017 to 2022 was essentially erased over 2023 and 2024. So a lot of people, because of this, there's this narrative right now that people are talking about. They're saying, well, I'm really afraid that Robert Saleh is going to come in and do a good job, and then the 49ers are going to lose him because he's going to sign and be a head coach elsewhere after the 2025 season. And to that I say, great. That's the goal. The 49ers want Robert Saleh to be pursued as a head coach after this season because it would mean that he did a good job as the 49ers defensive coordinator in 2025. It would mean that he hit it out of the park. I use this, and this should just sit next to me at all times. This guy right here, if he hired Robert Saleh, would want Robert Saleh to be going after head coaching jobs next offseason successfully. Why? Because it would mean that Saleh had been successful coaching for his 49ers. If you start thinking, if your mental framework is this gatekeeping, oh, I don't want my assistant coaches to leave to other teams. If that's how you're thinking, you're against advancement and you're against excellence. You just want to be safe. This is no time to be safe. The NFL is no league to be safe. No league for safe men. You want to take swings. You want the best possible coaching talent and the best possible player talent that is always seeking the next step forward. And for coaches, that is a promotion. That is a promotion to head coach. That means good coordinators are probably going to leave. Why do you think Bill Walsh's coaching tree was so big? You don't want guys to just sit around and become stale with your football team. So Bill Walsh would want that spirit of abundance, that spirit of advancement. And I think the 49ers, assuming that Robert Saleh does join, assuming that this can be finalized, they would want the same thing. We're in this like awkward position right now. You know, it's weird sometimes to talk about things that aren't official yet, but we understand the dynamics. We understand that it's likely. So we couch our words carefully. The 49ers likely land their big fish in Robert Saleh. Here are the wild twists that made it possible. You absolutely want guys to leave after a year. David McCoy here said in this comment. You don't want them to leave after a year because of poor performance. That's obviously something that teams don't want. Steve Wilkes, Nick Sorensen, that wasn't a good thing. That's why the 49ers are on their third coordinator in 3 years. But if Robert Saleh guides the 49ers to the number one defense, he will be sought after as a head coach. And in that case, yes, you're okay with it. And you better be working on the infrastructure in your own coaching staff to be able to replenish. That's one thing the 49ers did really, really well back when Saleh left the first time in the 2021 cycle. They were able to reload their defense because DeMeco Ryans was ready to take over as the defensive coordinator. I floated around the possibility of KJ Wright being the next DeMeco Ryans. I know that's a lot of pressure to put on KJ Wright, but he's a former linebacker, system knowledge, played under Saleh in Seattle, now probably will coach under Saleh. I would think the 49ers keep KJ Wright in the building, especially now that he's got a familiar face, likely to become the defensive coordinator. That's somebody that you can groom to become higher level coaching talent. And the 49ers did that really well, but the staff was getting rated year after year because of the success. It is part of the price of success. So they have to be as prepared and insulated for it as possible, but they absolutely want guys to get promotions. Again, if this guy right here on the cover of this book operated with a philosophy of wanting guys to get promotions as quickly and as soon as possible, I think that's probably the right strategy in NFL. This is considered the greatest coach in NFL history, the most influential coach in NFL history in Bill Walsh, that's for sure. Those of you listening on the podcast, you probably don't see that I'm holding up a book that says Genius and has Bill Walsh's picture on it. A sign of success of a leader is their prior subordinates' ascension to success. Yes, it might be the ultimate sign of success of a leader. Someone wants me to show the Bill Walsh coaching tree. It's a great call. Let's look at the Bill Walsh coaching tree. There is a good copy of this on Wikipedia. I'm getting this prepared and ready for everybody right now. You could go to Bill Walsh's page and the coaching tree pops up as part of his entry on Wikipedia, which is pretty neat. That's how impactful of a legacy Bill Walsh had. All right, so here you go. So you have Walsh at the top. Sam Wyche ended up with the Bengals, started as Bill Walsh's quarterbacks coach. George Seifert, Walsh's defensive coordinator for the majority of the 1980s. Dennis Green, an offensive coach. Mike Holmgren, offensive coordinator. Ray Rhodes, defensive coordinator of the 49ers, DB coach, then DC. I think, he was the DB coach under George Seifert, which also put him under Bill Walsh. So Walsh, Seifert, down the Ray Rhodes, and Mike White. And then each of these guys, after they went to be head coaches elsewhere, developed their own disciples. So Brian Billick is in the Bill Walsh coaching tree. Bruce Coslet in the Bill Walsh coaching tree. Tony Dungy in the Bill Walsh coaching tree. The most fascinating part of the Bill Walsh coaching tree is the Holmgren branch, because that included Steve Mariucci, who would go back to be the head coach of the 49ers. John Gruden, we all know him. Andy Reid is part of the Bill Walsh coaching tree through Mike Holmgren. Andy Reid was an offensive coach for those Green Bay Packers teams. Mike Sherman, Marty Mornhinweg. I mean, these are great, great names. John Harbaugh is part of the Bill Walsh coaching tree under the Ray Rhodes branch. The Packers branch, this one right here, is the most fascinating because of the rivalry that the 49ers and Packers had in the late 1990s. And I had a long discussion with Steve Young about this, and this was one of the most fun, insightful discussions that allowed me to learn about the game and its history. Steve talked about the fact that Bill Walsh would literally give his outgoing assistant coaches who had taken promotions elsewhere, he would give them a binder of everything that he knew and said, good luck. See you in the NFC Championship game. So when Mike Holmgren left the 49ers, he was their offensive coordinator and he left to be the head coach of the Packers. Bill Walsh gave Mike Holmgren a binder with everything that he knew, all the 49ers secrets, and told Mike, good luck. I'll see you in the NFC Championship game. What happened? The 49ers and the Packers ended up playing in the NFC Championship game. Bill Walsh was no longer the coach of San Francisco at that time, but Steve was so frustrated at the time because we all know the Packers had the 49ers number when they had Mike Holmgren for several straight years. They beat him in the playoffs in 1995, 27-17, divisional round. They beat him in 96 at Lambeau when Steve suffered that dislocated rib. That was a crazy, crazy story. Desmond Howard, remember him? Great returner for the Green Bay Packers. And then they beat him in the NFC Championship game at Candlestick, a really muddy, wet game in the 97 season, probably because the 49ers lost Jerry Rice. It wasn't until the 98 season where the 49ers got their revenge against the Packers, but they played them 4 straight years in the playoffs. Terrell Owens made the catch, and they finally got the monkey off their backs that year. But it wasn't until 98 that San Francisco finally was able to beat the Packers. And Steve Young said that he cursed Bill Walsh because he was so upset that Green Bay was beating them every single season with the literal blueprint that Bill Walsh had given them. After the NFC Championship game in the 1997 season, the 49ers were sulking, obviously. Green Bay beat them 23-10 at Candlestick. The 49ers are congratulating Green Bay. Steve Young walks up to Brett Favre and asks Brett Favre what speech Mike Holmgren gave the Packers before that game. Brett Favre recites the speech to Steve Young, and Steve realizes that it is the same exact speech that Bill Walsh gave the 49ers in the 1980s. And Steve could not have been more upset that Bill literally gave Green Bay everything because he had given Mike Holmgren the binder. It wasn't until many years later that Steve Young realized that this is why Bill Walsh was so great as the head coach of the 49ers. He wasn't gatekeeping. He turned San Francisco into this prime destination for the very best head coaching talent or best assistant coaching talent, because that talent would want to strive to become head coaches elsewhere. He didn't suppress what was happening in the 49ers building. Bill felt that he had been suppressed by Paul Brown in Cincinnati. That was at the core of Bill Walsh's upbringing as a coach in the NFL. So as soon as he escaped the orbit of Cincinnati and was able to build his own legacy, first as a head coach at Stanford and then as a head coach with the 49ers, he really wanted to make sure that those under him had upward mobility. And the upward mobility turned into this coaching tree. And yes, it did lead to some teams tormenting the 49ers later on, like these Packers, where it was really funny because Mike Holmgren developed the 49ers quarterback. He developed Steve Young, and Steve Mariucci developed Brett Favre. And then they flipped places, and Mariucci coached against Holmgren in 97 and 98. I mean, just if you talk about football being a small world and you appreciate all these things, the Bill Walsh coaching tree is a great place to start. This is where football nerd history really, really hits its stride, hits its A game. But all of this ended up coming full circle, and it ultimately was the secret sauce of what made those Bill Walsh 49ers teams great. So I go back to the comment that stays on the screen right now. A sign of success of a leader is their prior subordinates' ascension to success. And that's exactly what the 49ers want to see out of their current assistants. That's exactly what Bill Walsh saw out of his assistants. And that's exactly what you want to continue perpetuating if you're San Francisco. Dorsey Levens used to kill us. That's a good knowledge kind of comment. I mean, you could talk about Gilbert Brown, Dorsey Levens, Reggie White, Antonio Freeman, obviously Brett Favre. Just go on to YouTube and type in highlights of that 49ers-Packers rivalry in the 1990s. If you're a Niners fan, you might want to just put in the 98 game. It was January 99, the wild card playoffs. The other ones might hurt a little too much to watch. So back to the top, the 49ers and the NFL in a wild, wild confluence. We talked about the unprecedented Liam Coen drama. We talk about Robert Saleh being in line for a 49ers return. The article is in the description, so you should go ahead and check it out. The 49ers likely land their big fish in Robert Saleh, have that up on the San Francisco Standard. A little study of the 49ers defense over the years. They're trying to reverse the course here. I think the biggest thing for San Francisco is fixing the run defense. I mean, you look at this column on the left, look, it is dark red. They had never finished below average in run defense under Saleh or DeMeco Ryans. And then all of a sudden it tumbled to number 26 in EPA under Steve Wilkes, further down to number 29 in 2024 under Nick Sorensen. Sorensen, by the way, unlikely to remain on the 49ers staff. He's not going to be the special teams coordinator. We're waiting to see who the 49ers hire on that front. This is the article. I had a lot of fun with this. I mean, the first line, all gas, no brakes. The popular rallying cry of, boomerang 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh is a team slogan once again. Although it took more hairpin turns than the windy coastal road to Big Sur to reach a straightaway. And then at the end, I'm spoiling the end, but They've shown their old friend the gas pedal, but Saleh doesn't need to learn how to press it. He's driven this machine before. Boom. More questions. Let's go. By the way, I'll be coming on to John Lund's show in a few minutes as soon as I'm done here. So everybody, John does a great job. You guys should all type in John Lund on YouTube, former radio host in the Bay Area, now doing YouTube stuff. And it'll be my first time on John Lund's show. We'll do about 20 minutes. So as soon as this is done, you should probably head over there. Should be a lot of fun. Michael asks, why wouldn't Saleh go to the Raiders? Plus, the Cowboys and Saints head coaching jobs are still open. Saleh, not a slam dunk. So many twists already. Yeah, I'm saying it's not official yet. Like, I don't know how else to say that. The twists and turns of this have been crazy. All we can say is that it has been reported that Saleh has said that he will be a defensive coordinator with the 49ers if he is a defensive coordinator this year. So, and he hadn't interviewed with the Saints. He's interviewed with the Raiders, who signed Pete Carroll, and he wouldn't go to the Raiders because they signed Carroll, right? He has, again, he's told the 49ers that's where he wants to be, DC, not for Carroll and the Raiders. And we have to wait for it to become official. I can't tell you more than has actually happened. I'm just telling you guys what has happened. So all these whys and when it's going to be official, it's not. But the 49ers are likely to land Saleh. That's the best we can do right now. I'm looking for some more good questions. We can answer those as they do come in. I like this one. Delivering the truth. They call me Big Dave. I think you probably sent that a few minutes ago when I was talking about the 49ers coaching history. That was fun. This is, by the way, this is a really, really good book. Check it out if you have a chance. The Genius by David Harris. This is like the comprehensive book on the first part of modern 49ers history, which started when Joe Montana led the comeback against the Saints in 1980 at Candlestick. 35-7 was the score at halftime, and the 49ers won 38-35. That's when Bill Walsh said that modern 49ers history started, so we'll take his word for it. While you guys are all here, it would be awesome if you did hit that like button. It does support the channel greatly. And while you're here, it'd also be awesome if you went and subscribed or signed up for the San Francisco Standard. Got the most in-depth coverage of the 49ers, including really, really deep salary cap looks, Brock Purdy contract projection that has completely changed how the media is talking about Brock Purdy's contract. I know we have a lot of people just copying work out there, but I guess imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Anyway, you could get all this from the original source if you head to the San Francisco Standard. Just click on the link in the description and you could sign up for the membership there. And that's where you're going to get all this good stuff on the 49ers. But even if you can't do that, make sure you hit the subscribe button here on the YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the like button here on the YouTube channel. I know we've got a ton of you watching right now. And just know that I put in hours into this kind of stuff. So your support is always very, very appreciated. We also, on this channel, take frequent looks at the 49ers roster, which I know that a lot of people enjoy. And assuming that Robert Saleh does come aboard, this is the 49ers roster that needs to be built over the course of this offseason for San Francisco to be able to fire up a really good defense again, a defense that approximates what Saleh and DeMeco Ryans had in the past. That is the goal for the 49ers. But you look at the positions where they're going to need to sign guys, obviously linebacker. Does this make Dre Greenlaw's return more likely? Possibly. We'll see. Obviously, this has to officially happen first, and then we could start talking about the specific downstream effects. But I can tell you that they've got big gaps at linebacker, at cornerback. They probably need to sign one more safety. And I think defensive line, they've got a lot of guys under contract, but you could probably still spruce that up. And this team does have those 10 draft picks in the 2025 cycle. All right, guys, this has been fun. Everybody, thanks for watching. Saleh remains in line for a 49ers return. A wild 49ers NFL confluence. That Liam Coen drama was something else. Hopefully I recounted that in enough detail because it might have been unprecedented. Ghosting Tampa Bay, 26 hours later, resurfaces with a deal essentially done in Jacksonville. That was the Trent Baalke ouster that allowed that to happen. Coen, just like Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, didn't want Baalke, the former 49ers GM, in Jacksonville. So Baalke is gone. The news just is all intertwined. It's making my head explode here. I feel like that one crazy guy up tying up all the conspiracy theories up on the wall. You know that meme? It's a wild meme. Because, you know, we were talking about Pete Carroll as a 49ers possibility a couple days ago. He's now going to be head coach of the Raiders. And he was Saleh's old boss in 2013. So next steps, we wait for Robert Saleh and the 49ers to make this official because it isn't yet. And until the fat lady sings, you actually don't know for sure. But we can say right now that Robert Saleh and the 49ers have likely landed their big fish in Robert Saleh in this whole situation. So check out the article on the Standard to read about the wild twists and turns. And of course, I'm going to keep you updated as this all comes to its final fruition. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button. We'll see you guys all soon. And go over to John Lund's channel right now. Type in John Lund, Lund, and I'm going to hop on there in just a few minutes.